is up, RotoGrinders? NFL Week 1 is here, which means it's Wednesday night, which means the Pick Six Show. The Pick Six Show is back. John Daigle from Establish the Run, ETR, Rich Hribar, Sharp Football Analysis. You know him from the worksheets. Boys, no more best ball drafting, no more best ball talk until we victory lap the first touchdown on, we see NFL Week 1. But I'm sure you guys are in the best ball streets plenty. Actually, I know this. I heard you guys in plenty of podcasts, doing a little off-season stuff. I was telling this to Daigle the other day. You guys haven't been talking to me, but I've been having one-way conversations with both y'all, listening to your podcast, grinding away. Great content in the off-season. So happy that we are back doing it once again. Rich, welcome. It's been too long.
Yeah, I think this is – I was trying to do the math. It's year 8, maybe. If you combined, I think for us, it's 5. I think this is 5 for us. I think I did 3 with Silva and Crane, and then we had Crane for 1, and then I think it's just of these 3, 5.
Yeah, it's an evolution. It's like the Four Horsemen. I think it's always changing. Daigle, what were you gonna
always
say?
changing until lately. These 3 have held strong, so not changing anymore. Ideally.
I mean,
Daigle?
I'm staying until we get a shirt. Until Dan Bach prints us a shirt. Like, I mean, I gotta fight that. I gotta fight. We gotta live another day.
We made a push at one of the RG parties, and I don't know if he wasn't having it, or maybe I can't remember what he appeased us and said sure, and like he just assumed we'd never bring it up again. But
yeah, I mean, when they were sitting on 7 crates of Swolecast shirts, I think he was like, I think we're just done printing shirts altogether for individual shows.
Can we somehow convert the Swolecast? How do you turn Swolecast into Pick Six? Can we get an artist to work on that so we can save some money here? But shirt or no shirt, we are back. The Pick Six Show. Daigle, welcome. It's been too long.
Well, not long for you and I, because we just talked with each other on Saturday night on Rob Coakley's stream, and you said best balls ended. Yes, true. 24 hours till every lineup locks for the regular season, but somehow, some way, I still have 2 redraft leagues happening in an hour. And by the way, in an hour, we're going to be on this show. So I'm not quite sure how I'm going to navigate it yet, but we'll figure it out.
I have this isn't about us, obviously, but I have the RotoGrinders draft is at 9:00. So an hour and a half. So we are on the clock, and we might have to, we'll see how we pace the show out. We typically go a little bit longer when we talk our movies. We're not talking movies week 1. We'll discuss that in week 2. We'll have that conversation later. But before we even get the movies, we usually pump out at least an hour of content. Week 1, if you guys don't know, this is your first time here, welcome to the Pick Six Show. How it works is, how do we get to 6? Well, we focus on the 3 main games on the main slate. So we're not going to be talking about Thursday night, Kansas City, Baltimore, or the game in Brazil, Green Bay and Philly, San Fran and the Jets on Monday night, not really part of the conversation. And, NFL Week 1 DFS slate. Now, the sites did not cooperate. I don't know if this is how it's going to go going forward, but FanDuel decided to go old school and included the, fun game Sunday night, Detroit and the Rams. That is on the FanDuel main slate. DK cut that off years ago, and it does appear to be coming back. Of course, a lot of showdown stuff there as well. But yeah, so a little bit different slate, because Detroit and the Rams has actually the biggest total on the board if you include it with the other 12 on the main slate. Detroit, Rams, 51. We focus on the 3 main games, talk about it from all different angles, and then we kind of circle back and give our favorite quarterbacks, running backs, receivers in the remaining games, tight ends as well.
Yeah,
John,
always,
I
don't like that game's included on FanDuel.
I don't like it from a content perspective, but I think people might, I don't want to say ignore that game, because obviously a lot of people are working on optimizers and all that kind of stuff, and just whatever it pumps out. And
I like to have late swap options, and when that game is going to have pieces that you want to play on that site. Amon-Ra, Jared Goff stand out. If you want to get Rams special teams to play like Kyron Williams, you can do that. But Rams defense. But I like to be able to have those pivots, right? Like when you come into the 4:00 hour or the late afternoon games, and like, hey man, I bricked one of my early picks. I know that half the field still has Kenneth Walker against the Broncos. You got to make a decision to come out to try to make up that ground where it's just different. And it's just the isolated game. You're like, all right, And now I just got to survive Amon-Ra. Like I've got to, survive, Cooper Kupp and Puka and all those things. So it's like, I like when there's the multiple games, there's more optionality.
If you have no minutes remaining. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Dean, but I don't think it's just a subset of games. Didn't FanDuel add 3-point bonuses for 100 yards this year as well?
I don't know that.
That's great information to think about. I actually don't know that either.
I believe they did, but someone double check me on that fact.
Maybe fantasy sports. We care about today and today only. Today, I don't need it. But producer TJ. By the way, shout out to producer TJ. He's going to be producing us the entire season. He's saying yes, they did. So that's
pretty massive.
That is huge. Interesting. Yeah, that changes things for a guy like Amon-Ra. You get him 3 more points. All right.
FanDuel always was the site where you didn't have to necessarily eat like super wide receiver chalk, because if that receiver didn't score a touchdown, like you weren't going to get dragged, right? Like if Justin Jefferson has 7 catches for 130 yards, that's 23 DraftKings points, but that's, what is it? 19 and a half, or 18 and a half, over at or 16 and a half, actually. I'm good at math right now, at FanDuel. So like you didn't have to always pay like for that, like super chalky receiver that was 9K like you did on DraftKings, because you can get buried without a touchdown. Whereas, that now there's at least some, it's not full PPR still, but like that's information I definitely needed to go over.
Yeah, that definitely makes a difference for sure. And just get your screenshots in early. If you have no minutes related and you're playing on FanDuel and you're up at the top, you might get chased down Sunday night, because that Detroit Rams game should be a fair bit of fun. As always, John, you are in charge of selecting the 3 games. I like to play the home version, and I kind of got there. I feel like it was, I don't want to say obvious what the 3 best games are, but from a fantasy perspective. But I guess without further ado, we'll go ahead and dive right on in and talk about our first game. Jacksonville at Miami. The Jags on the road here getting 3.5. Always tough to play in Miami in September with the humidity. Jacksonville kind of sort of somewhat used to it in the same state. Probably not exactly the same, but it is a massive home advantage that Miami has, especially when they throw the visitors in the sun, which I always love, which is just, that's kind of cheating. It's kind of.
I think it's criminal. I think it's unfair. It's unfair, man. It shouldn't be allowed.
What are they going to do? Block the sun? What do you want them to
do? Well, they purposely designed that stadium to be that time. Just play the game at 4:00.
Well, no, because then Miami is only a 3-point favorite. Then they're not a 3.5-point favorite. We need that hook.
But it's brutal when you watch them. They'll show like that heat index, and you'll just see like everyone dying on the visitor side.
Oh yeah, and like all the souped up fans are on one side, the other side. We'll give
out here chasing the fastest team in the NFL. And like
it really is a good formula. It's that McDonald's are really, really sharp for sure. Daigle, do you want to open us up as far as Jacksonville and Miami? I actually, the other day when we talked about this, I think you kind of hinted that something would be interesting in this game. And I asked you a question and it was sort of incomplete. I was asking about Waddle. Like, are we concerned at all about, and maybe I'm just being a little bit paranoid Pete when it comes to like drafting my best ball stuff, but he was not non-contact jersey for a while, but we're assuming that they're all good to go now at this point. They're just playing games. They're just kind of being super cautious. Is everybody healthy here? Obviously Beckham not going to play the first 4 games, but we weren't really eyeing him anyways. But we're good as far as Waddle. Have we seen anything? Is he practicing now at full?
He's been practicing. I don't know in full, but he's been practicing all week long. I believe he may have even returned to practice at the end of last week. And honestly, a lot of these guys who we just weren't sure about, Dallas Goedert, Brock Bowers, Puka Nacua even, they all just kind of showed back up at practice. Everyone was trying to escape the last week of drills and just take this thing home, since we have 18 weeks plus the playoffs to go, which honestly, who isn't doing that? So that's okay. But I will begin with, first of all, the 3 games I selected. I always like to go off the board for at least one of them, but there are multiple players who need to be talked about in all 3 of these games. I'm also going to have a hard time dwindling down my quarterback pool this week. And so I just figured let's start with the chalk, and I can mention other games I may be interested in as dark horse candidates when we get to other positions. And I'll start with the Jaguars side of the ball here, because first of all, everyone remembers the last month of Trevor Lawrence when he was playing through concussion, high ankle sprain, and he was an entirely different player. But really, he fit into the same mold of NFL quarterbacks that struggle under pressure and just turn into pumpkins when they were under duress. That includes Matthew Stafford, Geno Smith, Jared Goff, Tua to an extent, even though you could argue the winter months do Tua in more than that. And Trevor Lawrence last year did complete 71% of his passes from a clean pocket compared to only 45% when he was under pressure. But then you step back from the offseason and look at what Miami has done, or really what they haven't done, and they're still just very empty in their front seven and gaining a pass rush. Bradley Chubb still on the PUP list, unclear when he's going to return. Christian Wilkins was lost in free agency to the Raiders. And so it just comes down to, for me, always looking to see which offenses can punch back against the Dolphins. And assuming that Trevor Lawrence is going to have a clean pocket here, I think the Jaguars' passing attack can definitely get there, which then, of course, makes me excited about this environment and game as a whole.
Pretty good price on Christian Kirk at 5.5. But if you can make the argument, somebody's probably gone back and done this, but I feel like that Lawrence, if the field was like, I don't know, 1 inch bigger or like 2 inches bigger last year, or like if it was like college football rules with just 1 foot in, I feel like I remember like 3 or 4 different occasions where he lost a touchdown because of his receiver just being out, and his numbers would look definitively better, I suppose. Jump in here, Rich, as far as the Jags. You have a preference as far as Kirk, the rookie Thomas. They brought in Gabe Davis. Will he just be exercising? Will he actually be catching footballs thrown his way? And then, of course, there's ETN in the backfield.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts, for the Jaguars, and they had a lot of moving parts in season last year across the offensive line. They suffered a bunch of injuries. Zay Jones went down early in the season. Then they lose Kirk at one point in the season. They're out here like in the 11th hour of the season, trotting out guys like Parker Washington. No supreme disrespect to Parker Washington, who's a fine player, but they were just in the bag, like on bodies, like towards the end of the season. So now you're starting fresh. You've got Gabe Davis coming in, reunited with Chad Hall, who was the wide receiver coach in Buffalo when he was there before coming over to Jacksonville. He's a first-round pick on Brian Thomas. They're getting Kirk back. And it's going to be interesting to see all these pieces kind of fit together. I mean, remember last year, they kind of showed us early on, they're like, Christian Kirk's only going to play in 3 wide receiver sets. Remember in week 1, he only had like a 40% route participation rate, and then Zay Jones gets hurt and he ended up being like a big time value kind of the rest of the way. He didn't score a lot of touchdowns. And when you look at like his career, he has one outlier season for fantasy football, and it also coincides with like a career spike in touchdowns. So those are always kind of like red flags to me. He literally averaged like the same exact yardage and the same exact receptions per game last year than he did in 2022. The difference was touchdowns. And Calvin Ridley's leaving behind literally a 50% end zone target share that's open for grabs. But do we believe Kirk's going to now inherit those when they add guys like Brian Thomas and they add a guy like Gabe Davis, right? Like this is where like those guys win. The tricky part to navigate that is if Kirk's not going to be playing in 2 wide receiver sets, like how much does he get on the field? Does he get enough equity without touchdowns, like yardage? And now that you need that, now you don't need 100 yards on FanDuel. But then you got 2 guys that just really haven't earned a lot of targets. I mean, Gabe Davis. Yeah, Gabe Davis has never earned, been targeted on over 20% per route in his career in a season. Brian Thomas Jr. was one of the worst targets per route run players in last year's draft class. He was just a big splash play guy playing with Neighbors and Jane Daniels. And in the preseason, tiny small sample, but he's only targeted on 7% of his routes. Like he didn't get a lot of targets either on his opportunity. So there's some guesswork here and to see how this all fits together. And then you have to do the Evan Ingram game too, right? Like Evan Ingram getting involved in this, because Evan Ingram is another guy that had really wild splits when Christian Kirk played and when Christian Kirk didn't play, which inherently makes sense because of where he earns his targets. So there's just a lot to juggle here in terms of what's to figure out with the Jaguars passing game if you want to run it back with the Lawrence side. I mean, the one thing I can say from the Jaguar side definitively is that Travis Etienne's going to get a bunch of touches out of the backfield. Like they didn't do anything. Doug Peterson can tell us until he's blue in the face, like they want to alleviate his workload. Then they should have got some more competition because they're running back the exact same group outside of Keelan Robinson that they did a year ago.
Supposedly Bigsby's improved, right? But he was,
of course,
he had to because like, what was the alternative, right? Like run backwards. I don't know. It was a rough season last year for Bigsby. So your favorite pass catcher there, Rich? I didn't really
I don't know. I'm saying I don't know.
I didn't really get anything.
And not to like hem and haw, like this is week 1, right? There's so many spots, especially coming into this. Like we're just looking for early reveals, right? Like we just don't know. There's so much we don't know. So it makes the slate so fun. The pricing's been out for 6 weeks. There's a lot in motion. We're still trying to get no one plays in the preseason anymore. So it's like hard to put all these pieces together. So I honestly don't really know. I honestly really don't. That's what makes it the hardest thing about playing the Lawrence side. Maybe Daigle, do you have a guy that you definitively have a firm stance on?
I know Gabe Davis is 4,200. I definitively know his salary. That's about all I have. In week 1, we always joke, again, having done this for 5 seasons, that we just make it up on the fly since we don't know. And the last 2 years, same thing. It's the same way I feel about preseason usage when everyone else is citing it. I definitely take some nuggets from there. But honestly, the last 2 seasons since cut down day has become just 1 day to shed your roster from 90 players to 53. And there's been 1 less preseason game until 2026, when there's going to be just 2 preseason games and then 2 buys in 20 weeks. And honestly, that data has become much more misleading than helpful these last couple of seasons. And so I even went back and looked up what Anthony Weaver did his last time as defensive coordinator in 2020 with the Texans. But again, we just don't know. So I know a low salary. I know an environment against an offense we don't think will be stopped, since even last year, the Jaguars defense is something we targeted in the second half of the season because their EPA per play we knew was a farce that entire time. So I know Gabe Davis is cheap, and that's about as far as I can get.
Yeah, we got 17 new defensive coordinators this year. The NFC, 10 of 16 NFC teams have new defensive coordinators. There's just a lot in motion here. We're looking for a lot of things to be revealed. I can say definitively, though, we can say we believe in the other side of the football in this game. Especially like Dean alluded to. I mean, in these games under Mike McDaniel, these games where Tua and the Dolphins have been home favorites. Miami's 7-1 in those games. Tua's completed 73% of his passes, almost 9 yards per pass attempt, 16 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He's averaged a little under 18 fantasy points per game in those contests. Even the pieces, you look at what the Jaguars have kind of added defensively, getting, Eric Armstead. There's still not a lot that you're scared of objectively, especially now when you're talking about matching the kind of speed here. The trickiest part for the Dolphins is we can play the 2 aside. We know we can pay for the wide receivers. You're not going to get any deals. And one of the early reveals I think we're looking for is the backfield usage here, because we never saw really at any point last season where the Miami backfield was healthy in unison. Achane started the year hurt. He comes back. They have that massive game against Denver where they score the 70 points, and him and Mostert combined for 32 touchdowns in the same game. But then from that point on, they only had 5 games the rest of the season where both of those 2 guys made it through a whole game together. And then you add Jalen Wright to the factor here too. So it's I don't think the intent was ever for Mostert to get as much work as he did last year. It became a necessity. Then we just never had Achane. We had him coming in and out of the lineup. He was lightning in a bottle. Now you got kind of these 3 capable guys. They're all fast. They can be kind of interchangeable. I do believe they want to get Achane involved more in the passing game his second season. That's more speculation on my part. But who gets that first goal line carry when the Dolphins are the 2-yard line? Who's in the game? Do you think it's going to be Achane, or do you think it's going to be Mostert? Because I can tell you the field right now thinks it's going to be Achane. I mean, I imagine that Achane's going to be the more popular play of the 2 in this game.
So it's a Wednesday night. This is when I remind the people it's Wednesday night, and the slate is fluid. But as of right now, Achane is the most popular ownership projected running back we have on DraftKings, 23%, and I believe is the most popular also on FanDuel. Jonathan Taylor we have in front of him, but 20% on FanDuel. And of course he's been shooting up the boards as far as best ball. He's going 20th, 18th, depending on. People love him. He's a fun player. He averaged 19 yards per carry last year.
Yeah, 7. but I mean, he had 12 total touches last year inside the 10-yard line. If you're telling me he's going to be the most popular running back and he might not even get goal line carries, to me, I'm going to easily just try to pivot and try to, because there's so many guys in that same price range where you're all right, well, that guy also could get 2 touchdown upside. He has 2 touchdowns upside too. So it's if he's going to be the most popular running back on a slate, and we have to do guesswork if he's even going to get goal line carries, because we do in week 1, because he didn't get him last year. He just scored a bunch of long touchdowns. like, I mean, to me, that makes me want to go in a different direction.
Is he 185 or so? He's not a big dude, right? He's not somebody that's gonna like bang him between the tackles.
I mean, supposedly he's gained weight this offseason. We've heard this before from like multiple running backs over our lengthy time playing fantasy football, whether it be the Andre Ellingtons of the world. Not to put that on Devin Achane, but he entered the league 188. Says he's gained muscle.
What are you projecting for Tua's ownership right now on a Wednesday, Dean? Because are we even going to get an edge and stacking Tua with Achane? Probably not.
No. Well, let's see. The quarterback ownership is pretty flat.
It's
we
usually
have,
pretty,
we have Jaden Daniels because he's 5'7" on DK. He's got wheels, 12%. Caleb Williams, 12%. Everybody else in the single digits. We have Tua at 3%. Like, if you like Tua, play Tua. Maybe he gets to 7 or whatever.
But I actually think he's going to come in lighter this opening week because of the way that pricing always is in week 1. And people will just say, I don't have to get to Tyreek, right? Because there's so much other value. It's not like one of these weeks where we're in week 8 and it's like, dude, Tyreek's playing the Commanders. Like, you'd be like, good luck if we're going to fade him, right? Like, but now it's like, since like the pricing's been out for so long, like there's just more of an open board. Like, Daigle, you kind of already hinted at like trying to whittle your quarterbacks down. How about every position? Like, it's, I want to play 20 different running backs, it feels like, I have like 15 receivers on my short list. It's like, oh my goodness, it's not short at all.
I did my rankings last night, and like I had the same exact feeling. I was looking forward to the show for multiple reasons, but in part to kind of whittle down my player pool because I feel like the slate is so wide open for week 1. It's just like, sometimes we have a couple players that because of injury and salaries getting set a month ago, it's like, okay, we kind of sort of have to play a lot of this guy just because the role is too good and the price is too cheap. But we don't really have that. But we have a lot of good plays, but not a lot of must play. So I'm glad you feel the same way. Yeah. It feels like the slate is just wide open ownership wise. And that's where we're at. And I don't know if that's going to change. Do you have a similar thought there, John? And as far as Miami, Tyreek Hill is good. Waddle's good. That's where their passes go. Anything else? Did you have a lean as far as their running back? Give us your Dolphins thought.
Yeah, it's like the longer you do this, as Rich and I have, you learn that, especially when it becomes later in the year, you're getting a little tired. Like, you don't need to spend 3 paragraphs on Christian McCaffrey and Tyreek Hill. They are good players. They are good plays. Can you afford them? It's pretty much that simple every single week. I do, again, have a lot of confidence in this game, whereas the others I can poke holes in it, and we're about to get there. So I still want to be able to fit, a 3% Tua and see what I can do around that. But again, that touchdown equity is going to matter a lot, most likely. So if I spin off and do the teammate theories we always talk about, trying to get an edge from Chris Godwin to Mike Evans, trying to get an edge from in the past, like Keenan Allen and Josh Palmer, perhaps then Mostert over Achane for sure. But as Rich alluded to, I do also believe in 1, Achane's receiving usage, and 2, more importantly, because it becomes under Mike McDaniels. No other coach, I believe, when they say that. But whenever like this guy lets Achane run 11 routes in the preseason and 4 of them are lined up from the slaughter out wide and they're throwing deep targets to him, I believe they just want to get their best players the ball, and that includes Achane. So maybe a little mini stack like that I'm still very interested in.
Any interest in Jonnu, new tight ends? Just as a flyer, maybe a way to be a little bit different to get a cheap, second piece or third piece if you're going for a big stack there. The onslaught for Miami, sort of throwing it out there. Malik Washington's 3K. I don't think he's going to be worth talking about, but I know a lot of people like him as a late round flyer in best ball. Of course, no Beckham. They're not very deep after Hill and Waddle, but that's where their passes go. Barrios. Anything left to be said here as far as the Dolphins?
I like the angle of if you're going to play Achane, then you play playing him with Tua. I like that angle more than just blindly the field going to Achane as the plug and play running back, like just the default, like most popular running back play. I like playing with Tua a lot. Some
have touted Jonnu Smith, as you said, best ball redraft, which again, I've made much dumber 20th round picks. Don't care about that at all. Tout whoever the hell you want. But honestly, like when we're looking at this with our actual money on the line from a week to week view, it's just better, especially under McDaniels, to elevate the actual talent and forego all this other stuff. Because trust me, as I'm sure you did too, We played Durham, Smythe, and Cash last year, and it ultimately just doesn't matter because McDaniels will instead find a way to get Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle 2 more targets.
And they might even be 1 and 1A, right? Jonnu Smith and Smythe, they might actually split stuff. I think that happened at least at some point during the preseason. And like, you never really know, is this actionable? Is this real? Is it not? Are they just screwing around? You never really know motivation sometimes. Okay, let's move on to game 2. Arizona and Buffalo, 48 total. Buffalo, of course, no Steph Diggs. We're looking at Keon Coleman, the rookie, Shakir, Curtis Samuel, who I believe got in a full practice or was practicing. He was dealing with a leg, I believe. It looks like he's going to be turf toe, which that is tricky. Dalton Kincaid looking to take a leap here in the second season. Of course, the other side of this game, Marvin Harrison making his debut in Buffalo. Kyler Murray, who seems to be getting more and more popular as we etch up to close to the season. One of my favorite quarterbacks this season. Should be a fun game, fun shootout here, potential in Buffalo. Rich, why don't you open it up for us? Dealer's choice. Arizona, Buffalo, 48 total. The Bills are favored by 6.5, 7, depending on.
Yeah, and that's where you kind of have to start, right? Like it's just another great spot for Josh Allen. I have a lot of questions of what's going to happen this year with the Bills and big picture, but I look at that team total and I look at this Arizona defense that was so passive under Jonathan Gannon last year, and they lost their best pass rusher in the preseason. They just don't really have the bodies yet. They're smart. Like I think this is the way I would have done it too, is they've invested heavily on young offensive players and they're trying to build that up right now. And then they're probably going to we'll start to see this offseason them start focusing on defense, but they built this offensive core now. They've invested a lot of capital into doing so, but the defense still needs a lot of work. I mean, last year they were 24th in pressure rate. They were dead last in the league in blitz rate. They were 25th in sack rate. They played man coverage at the 28th rate in the league. As a result, they were 31st in completion rate allowed, 31st in passing points allowed, 27th in yards per pass, and 31st in touchdown rate. Like, you look at these spots where Allen has been a large home favorite in games where he's been 6 or more point home favorite. He's averaged 23 fantasy points per game. No Steph Diggs. There are some questions, like I said, but I do believe he finds a way to get there in this game, in this particular matchup. I think there'll be other weeks where we maybe question it for Josh Allen, but given his price too, he might end up going a little overlooked. You don't have to play him with anyone either because of his rushing equity. But if I was betting on one of the guys, I think that just you have to bet on Kincaid, right? Like, there's just really not many iterations of where you play this Buffalo season out and Kincaid's healthy and he's not the focal point of this passing game. I like Shakur. I like him as an efficiency stance. It looks like he's going to only play in 3 wide stuff early on. We'll see if that changes. It looks like him and Samuel are a little bit interchangeable. And Keon Coleman did absolutely nothing the preseason to quell any of the concerns we had about him. Like, of him being able to get open. He averaged under a full yard per route run on 32 routes this summer. 0.63 yards per route run. Did it look like he was getting open at all against NFL talent, which wasn't going to be a concern. So I think that if I'm going to play anyone with him, it'd be Kincaid. And I also think that just one other guy you can play. And I think it spins off into what Daigle just said. I think that this is a spot where James Cook might go overlooked. Huge home favorite. Typically we like to play running backs. Again, Arizona just did absolutely nothing. We picked on them every week. We picked on them last year. And James Cook was a guy who, under Joe Brady, had some real pop games, against Dallas, against Kansas City in the playoffs, and against Kansas City actually in the regular season and the playoffs. So James Cook would be a guy I think that could be a stacking partner with him too. James Cook's a little tricky because you just never know about the touchdowns. And when you look at where he's priced versus like a Kenneth Walker, and you're like, oh, wow, if he doesn't get a touchdown, like Walker could get 2, or like Achane could get 2. But I do think that James Cook is on board there too. So Kincaid and Cook would be like my 2 guys.
Are we confident that Cook is the goal line guy over Davis? Is that like
no? I mean, are we confident either one is the goal line guy over Josh Allen?
Right.
Well, yeah, I guess Allen's one. Yeah, that's probably the better question. With no Diggs though, it's obviously much cheaper to stack Allen. I think they have the biggest team total as well at 27. But like you said, you could play Josh Allen a la carte. You can play him by himself. I do like the pairing with Kincaid, probably my favorite. Your thought here, Daigle, when it comes to the Bills' offense?
It's pretty much what Reebs said. Shakur's the one I, oddly enough, have the most confidence in, maybe because I just don't know about Keon Coleman's role from week 1 and Curtis Samuel's ominous injury. I understand he practiced in full as of Wednesday, but it seemed like it was going to be a multi-week thing. Not only that, but he was successful in his first year under Joe Brady. Career high fantasy points per game, 71% of his routes from the slot, a career high in carries as well. But maybe it only leads to more gadget plays if he is limited with this injury and get Shakir on the field more. So that's pretty much it for me too. Allen with Kincaid. Cook is interesting because he had more games with 70% of the team's backfield touches without Joe Brady in the first half of the season. But what Brady did really was make a more efficient offense by trying to get Josh Allen to calm down, play more within the line of scrimmage, and use the running backs more, especially on early downs. So we know that's an efficient way to pass. And if that is the case, yes, maybe it is Cook. And we saw that even if it's a hot hand situation, they've admitted that in that Cowboys game, it was not supposed to be James Cook. It's just that when you average 8 yards per touch, you have no choice but to keep giving the ball to James Cook. So certainly that's definitely like a Tua and Achane. Allen and Cook is one that I didn't even think of. That's a good point, Rich.
Yeah. I mean, that's one. And I mean, man, like this Arizona defense, like I just don't see, like when you look at them on paper, like I just don't see how they got really even better to where they go from. Because there's like, you could move from like the 32nd ranked defense, like the 20th and still be terrible. I don't even know how they like make that kind of jump. Like they just don't have anybody on paper that you're scared of defensively.
Well, it seems like a good setup for Murray to be chasing. Connor feels like
all year we'll probably be doing this.
Yeah, it's not in the turf. That's going to be more fun when they're home on the turf, right? As opposed to in Buffalo. The weather should be fine, I presume. I haven't checked, but obviously it's not late in the season where it's potential snow and things of that sort. But Murray to Harrison, you got the short king Dortch. McBride, speaking of tight ends that we love, I think Kincaid on one side, McBride works for me as well. I do like Arizona as a chase. Of course, Murray's another guy that can get there on his own. But where are you at as far as the Cardinals, Rich?
Yeah, it's another one of those kind of, tricky spots because it's easy to just look at face value and take everything McBride did to close the season. But then you say, all right, well, he was competing with Greg Dortch and Rondale Moore. Like now he's competing with what was thought as a locked in, like transcendent, prescient wide receiver prospect in Marvin Harrison Jr. So there will be some sharing of targets here. Like he's not going to have the target gap over the field like he had that final 7 weeks of the season last year when Kyler came back. So there is going to be some pull there, and that just adds some layers of variance there with it. But I mean, yeah, it would be McBride, it'd be Harrison. Like as you bring back, so it'd be depending on if you played Kincaid, but you're not going to discount either of those guys. They're kind of interchangeable salary wise. But yeah, Marv. I mean, interesting enough, they're all the rookie wide receivers on this opening slate are pretty cheap, and like we'll probably talk about a few of them along the way. And you look at like week 1 wide receivers in the past, like rookies, like there's been some like real big hits out of the box. So like these guys like Harrison and Neighbors, like definitely should be like on your mind at these price points because this might be the cheapest we see some of these guys all year.
Do you have a favorite by chance? You reference
I like Neighbors the most where he's priced just because the target potential and that Vikings game could be also potentially kind of sneaky shootouty. So like I think Neighbors just because Neighbors doesn't have McBride on his team.
No, his competition for targets is not very good.
Theo Johnson.
But do you know who's throwing him the ball, right?
Yep. That's definitely part of the price too.
Point counterpoint, I suppose.
Yeah.
You kind of poo-pooed, at least maybe that's the way I heard it. Did you not like Keon Coleman as a prospect? Didn't sound like you did.
I mean, I feel like Keon Coleman is entering the NFL and where the NFL meta game is offensively and defensively, like 6 years too late. Like, I mean, the game has transitioned to more middle of the field. You need a wide receiver that can be used with diversity and can create separation and can create yards after the catch. And he's just a throwback X type of receiver, kind of like he doesn't really create a lot of separation. He's not going to like break a lot of tackles. He's a super cool dude, though. I'm rooting for the hell out of this kid because he's so fun. Like, I hope he's good because he's got Marshawn Lynch potential. Like, if we can give him some kind of star. Yeah, he's super fun. But I mean, all the questions I have about him as a prospect in the way the NFL's played, like, maybe he's like a discount version of Gabe Davis, and that's what we're getting. But like, how excited were you ever to always play Gabe Davis, right? Like, to me, Shakir is the most talented guy. I like Samuel, but I have a problem citing the Samuel Joe Brady stuff because that was the same year Christian McCaffrey only played 3 games. Like,
Sure.
and if Christian McCaffrey is going to be out for basically the entire season, and your alternative is Mike Davis, and granted, a lot of people did like Mike Davis after that year, but like, of course, you're like that's going to help a guy like Curtis Samuel, right? That because he had the boost in carries. I think he carried ball like 41 times that year, and you can get those short targets. But if McCaffrey plays that season, does that season look as good for Curtis Samuel? Probably not. We're probably not going so hard in the paint and saying, look at what he did with Joe Brady.
Producer TJ in chat saying Mac Hollins season, which it's pretty ambitious. He'll be on the field some, like he'll be in uniform, and I guess he'll have a chance in theory. But to me, that's a little bit too ambitious, I suppose. By the way, shout out to the chat. Appreciate y'all watching, listening to us live on the YouTube, recording it 7:30 on a Wednesday. I'm not sure if that's going to be our official time. It might be 9, might be 7:30. We'll let you guys know going forward. But while you're here, hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications. Brian is saying Odunze, if Keenan Allen doesn't play, is he hurt because of the extra weight? What's the deal with Keenan Allen? Is he injured? I heard he was huskier this year.
Daigle moved to Chicago so he could speak on this, but every time I visit Chicago, I get heavier too.
That Chicago pizza? The deep dish does you in?
Was that tweet or meme true about Keenan Allen?
Him reviewing pizza places?
Yeah, he developed an account to review pizza places. It seemed like it could have been true. I mean, to be fair, I would have do that too.
Yeah. But when you get your take here, John, as far as Arizona, how do you feel about the Cardinals? Anything you want to add to the conversation?
It comes down to the game script again, which is, again, a lot of these games we're talking about. What do you believe will happen? And if you believe the Cardinals will hang around and compete, if not beat the Bills, and that's okay, then you can attack it however you want because James Conner is going to be a pivot point here. From week 10 on, whenever the Cardinals got back Kyler Murray, they were quite literally one of the best offenses in the entire NFL. A lot of that is because of Drew Petzing, who it still has, like, outside of Ben Johnson, the most respect from me as the next offensive-minded future great head coach. With Kyler Murray in the lineup, 5.3 yards per play, which was 11th in the league. They put points on the board on 42.5% of the drives, which was the 5th highest rate in the league, and they matched the 49ers with a league-high rate of 10-yard runs. Now, although the Bills' defense last year, which it's going through its own problems, like Rich mentioned, we're shuffling a lot of players in and out due to free agency. Matt Milano also absent from the middle of this field with a biceps injury. You have to ask, like, if the Cardinals aren't going to hang around, then what does that run play rate the Bills allowed last year matter at all? Like, is James Conner going to stick around and catch passes, or is it going to be more Marvin Harrison Jr., Greg Dortch in 3 wide sets, Trey McBride? And so that's something everyone has to figure out for themselves. I'm still open to Conner pending his ownership just because maybe the Cardinals don't stop the Bills, but I'm willing to play it as much if I get low ownership on Conner. Having said that, I do have the most confident in Trey McBride among all the tight ends on the board this week, I believe. And I'm curious to know what you have on him so far in ownership, Dean, because it's the same thing that happened with the Bills down the stretch heading into the postseason last year. And that, remember, they lost their bevy of coverage linebackers, Tyrell Dodson included, who followed Mike McDonald to Seattle in the middle of the field. And last year, without Milano, without Dodson, like everyone from Durham Smythe, who we mentioned earlier, had 3 catches for 30 yards. Pat Freiermuth put 75 yards on them. Everyone remembers the wild card when Travis Kelce went for 75 yards and 2 touchdowns. It's a similar situation without Milano in week 1. So I will say McBride's the one I have the most confidence in regardless of the game script.
The price is going to keep him down a little bit. We currently have him at 9% on DK. Conner, by the way, it's 7%. So I don't think either one is going to be terribly popular. I like them both individually as well. I think Conner's just because, assuming they're not getting completely shellacked, ideally Arizona probably wants to give him the ball 20 times.
It's like Reebs said, it's that not dead zone, but it's just like a log jam zone of we're trying to play 6 guys. And so I may just bring it all down to Sunday morning and play the ownership game at the end of the day.
See, that's John, I don't know if there is going to be an ownership game. Maybe I'm wrong, and this could settle.
They probably just cannibalize each other outside of Achane. I think Achane's going to be the most popular player at the position. Him and Kenneth Walker. I think Kenneth Walker will be the other guy, like, throughout the week just the other large home favorite, right? A large home favorite against the Broncos team. Again, like this Arizona team, like just didn't add a lot to the defensive front. I mean, we'll probably get there with Kenneth Walker, but Kenneth Walker is going to be, I think Kenneth Walker and Achane are going to be the two most popular running backs.
We have Taylor 18% and Walker at 17, but this stuff settles.
I have a hard time believing the 9K running back. I have a hard time believing the 9K running back is going to be the most popular play, but
Taylor's 7.8 on DK.
Yeah, 7.8 and 8.6, right?
Yeah, and 6.1 for Walker. 6.1 for Walker. So you're getting a big enough discount. Hubbard is next, by the way, because we do live in the world of a salary cap, and he is the guy, I suppose. That game's a weird game. I don't think I'm going to have a lot of Carolina New Orleans. I'm curious how much those players pop up when we run down our favorite plays at each position. But anything else here as far as Buffalo, Arizona boys, or shall we move on?
No, it should be a fun game, man. The card, like Daigle said, like Drew Pett saying, like they were feisty last year. I mean, the thing is, the defense is the defense just any better? Like it has to, like, because they hung around a couple games late in the year, like the 49ers, the Bears, and then like eventually like teams just pulled away from them because like you were just able to do whatever you wanted, throwing or rushing against Arizona, and we'll just see if that, like, how this rolls over in week one. I think because Bill's offense has a lot of kind of questions to answer in itself.
All right. Before we get to game 3, a reminder, do not forget to join in the fun each week with RotoGrinders Listener League. Play alongside other viewers as well as your favorite hosts. You can play alongside Rich and John. We're going to have our own host team. You'll have a chance every single week to compete for first place. Win yourself a month of RG Combo Premium. Just check the description for an invite. And for the contest, you get the invite in the description there on the YouTube. We're locking in Achane, right? We just kind of feel the reason for the block. We have to, so there's like some sort of punishment if we are the lowest amongst all the host shows. That it's kind of up for discussion. But we don't want to be that. We don't want to be that show where every single week we're doing something clownish, I suppose. But we'll see how that goes going forward. But Rich, I assume we're playing Achane in our, I guess it's a cash lineup essentially. Is it because we want a big enough floor that another show blows it, basically. I think that's what we're shooting for. We want to win too.
Maybe. We'll see.
We'll see. Stay tuned on that. All right, last game. Houston, Indianapolis, 49 total. Houston on the road, 3-point dog at the Colts. Richardson should be a lot of fun. Stroud, of course, breakout quarterback last season. John, the board is yours. Start wherever you want to start with the Texans and the Colts.
Let's start with the Texans side of the ball, because another game we can poke holes in given the situations. And Stroud's 2 matchups against the Colts last year, he attempted a season-high 47 passes in the first one because the Texans were getting their ass beat by 3 scores in the fourth quarter. And then in what was essentially a playoff game in Week 18, although he averaged 10 yards per attempt and was very efficient, we still got that Bobby Slowick thing that annoys us that we talk about every single week, and that they ran the ball in 55% of their early downs, despite only averaging 3.2 yards per carry on first and second down in that game. And remember, that was without a running back who they just gave a 3-year, $25 million plus contract to as well. And so although it naturally aligns for Stroud on paper with Gus Bradley doing quite literally the same thing every year, we talk about it twice a year as well. We're just going to run a ton of zone coverage and a ton of cover 3. And last year we talked about Stroud was quite literally one of the best quarterbacks in the entire league against zone. We also have Stephon Diggs here now making the target shares murky and being a guy who actually kind of fits with the Texans offense as someone who can play the slot and just settle in to zone coverage and get hammered and sandwich targets, especially in DraftKings, a PPR site, over the middle of the field. We still have to question, especially if it comes down to ownership, is that going to be the game plan? Are they going to let Stroud light up the scoreboard? And it's a situation where, of course, I'm scared about. It could end my life. I could just get zeroed out in every lineup if I don't play Stroud in the passing attack. But also it's volatile enough to where maybe instead I do lean on Joe Mixon.
Pulled it up. Currently, Dell is the most popular, mostly probably because of his price. He's 5.5 on DK.
Yeah.
Just 7-8% or so. Diggs at 6-7, 3-4%. Not terribly popular. Collins at 5%. So, just play who you like, right? But Dell is going to be the most popular just because because of that price. Is he not going to be playing, or how are they going to shuffle through these guys here, Rich?
Yeah, I mean, this is not off from the Miami backfield situation we talked about a year ago, right? Like when you look at the raw numbers that Tank Dell and Nico Collins had, it's because they never played together. They were on the field for 34% together for 34% of Stroud's dropbacks last year. Like they just weren't on the field a lot together. When you look at, so Dell was targeted on 29% of his routes with Collins off the field, 21% with him on the field. Same, and Collins had the same exact split, 29.5% with Dell on the field, 22.9% with Dell on the field. Now we add a third body. And a capable body. This isn't even like a Jalen Wright, like where we have to guess for like a rookie. It's, an absolute established wide receiver, at least for the front half of last year. And that's kind of the wild card, right? So like, I do believe Dell, when he's in the game, he's gonna probably be in on passing downs. I don't know if he's a big, like maybe like Christian Kirk, where we talk about like he doesn't play a lot in 2 wide receiver sets, but when the snaps he does play, like their routes, like its route participation is still fine. The Texans will be dropping back to pass. It'd be different if we could just, like we said, Daigle kind of led about to a Bobby Sloak, and this coaching tree Bobby Sloak comes from. And it's the same thing we talk about with Miami and trying to find like a third wheel for Miami always, right? How much 3 wide receiver stuff are we going to get? This is not a system, of course, of all along, like all the iterations of it that plays a lot of 3 wide receiver sets, but now you have 3 good players, and typically your personnel will dictate what you do. You're good players, right? And Dell is absolutely one of the best offensive players on this team, so it should go up. They didn't really give us any inkling that was going to happen in the personnel. They were 20th in rate of 3 wide receiver stuff last year on passing plays. But again, everyone was out of the lineup. They were dead last this preseason in rate of 3 wide receiver stuff on passing plays. And we know they're going to incorporate a fullback. So it's like, it's just kind of a weird thing to like kind of dissect. We're looking for, again, these early cards to be revealed, right? And to kind of figure out what we have here. Now that could create a buying opportunity because everyone's doing some guesswork. So like maybe you do kind of the game where you look at ownership and you try to play some stuff. The guy I have the most confidence in just from an archetype stance is Nico Collins, though. Like I know Nico Collins is going to be on the field. I know he can command targets in the red zone. So, I mean, if I'm forced to play one, if I'm looking for a stacking partner with Stroud, it's Nico. But that's the toughest thing about Stroud in this spot is it is hard to diagnose like who you actually want to run him back with on his own team.
Stroud also isn't cheap. And like his route is he has to go for 303. Like he kind of has to do that because he's not going to get there with the wheels unless he has like a quarterback sneak or 2 or something like that, which is pretty unlikely. That's why, I have a hard time getting to him. I'm not going to like tell you can't play. I'm not going to besmirch Stroud, but like he's pricey and he's not going to run for 50 or 60 yards, or he's not going to score a touchdown or 2 on his legs, most likely. Also kind of a throwback game here, John, where we have 2 running backs that are probably going to get 80% of the snaps, 80% of the touches, maybe more, with Mixon and Taylor. Not a lot behind Taylor with Sermon and Goodson. I know Cam Akers, people are talking about him making a comeback, and he had a nice play or 2 in the preseason, and good for him. But, they paid Mixon, and I imagine he's going to get a ton of touches here. A little bit different as far as today's football with, a lot of the, pairings for many of our teams that are going with. But it seems like Taylor and Mixon will be the full workhorses. I'm more interested here, John, in Richardson, just because, again, the whole legs conversation. He can move, he can scoot, he can run for 100 yards. That's something he can do. He can play a bad game and still get there, right? Fantasy-wise, that's all we care about. Your thoughts as far as the Colts offense?
And he played kind of a bad game, at least through the air, the last time we saw him play the Texans too. Again, questioning what both sides are going to do, because yes, we know Richardson will get his despite having less than a 60% completion rate last year, still led every quarterback with over 10 rushing points per game, scored 4 rushing touchdowns also in his time and 4 starts. But it's the fact that they ran the ball so well with either Zach Moss, who averaged over 4.5 yards per carry, 88 yards and a touchdown the first time they played, or in that, again, practically a playoff game with Jonathan Taylor, who had 30 carries for 180 yards in that one. Like they did so well on the ground, regardless if it was Richardson or Gardner Minshew, that I do wonder if they don't just lean on John Taylor again, which would slow the game down and just becomes a reason to fade. I think Anthony Richardson will naturally get steamed here because it does seem like everyone's going to lean on him on FanDuel and cash games, and just for salary, Jaden Daniels on DraftKings. But Richardson just having the upside from the ground solo, especially as a pivot off of Jonathan Taylor. If the projections are still showing high ownership come Sunday morning, I think Richardson will still get steamed. And of course, he's a good play. It just, again, depends on what you're dictating for this game script. And I think I'd rather play it a little more safe on both sides of the ball and not be too heavily involved.
Downs, we're assuming he's going to play. Is he going to be a full go?
I think we're assuming he's not going to play.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, I think we're assuming he's not going to play. He had an ankle sprain. He hasn't practiced yet this weekend. Granted, it's Wednesday night, but I think the assumption is that he won't play, which sets up, AD Mitchell as kind of like one of these cheaper guys to kind of splash in. I mean, that's the toughest thing when you get to like where you talk about like Dell's pricing is Dell this preseason ran a route on 64% of Stroud's dropbacks, and he's priced around guys that like Terry McLaurin, Deontay Johnson, like those dudes are gonna be on the field every play.
Yeah.
And that's like the toughest part, right? Like to say like, all right, there is upside with a guy like Tank Dell on a like per target basis. We know like what he could do. It's almost like A-Chan a little bit, but you're still like, there's some volatility there when you're talking about like, hey, I know McLaurin isn't coming off the field. I know Deontay Johnson's not coming off the field. Then we're not having to like the cheaper whack-a-moles, which is where we get to with, AD Mitchell in this game. And if there was a weaker point for the Texans last year, it was their interior pass defense. And we saw him, AD Mitchell, that is, just line up and fill that role in the slot this preseason. He ran 83% of his routes in the slot. He was targeted on 22% of those routes. He had more yak this preseason than he had, I think, his whole senior year at Texas. Yep. Because, so, I mean, he definitely is interesting. He's gone the complete opposite of Jermaine Burton, right? Like Jermaine Burton was a guy that has been just like a negative feedback loop this entire preseason, and it's been the opposite for AD Mitchell. Everything's just gone positively for him, and he's picked up all this positive momentum. So I mean, yeah, he's a guy that I think is on the board, at least in that cheap pricing. It's a bummer because like it's the opening week of the season and you have these guys like Shakir, AD Mitchell, and the pricing so nebulous. Like if we would have killed for a guy, like when we get to like week 7, we'll kill for a spot like this.
Mm-hmm.
The prices tend to go up more often than they go down based upon performance.
Unless like Tank Dell last year. Remember that was the thing with Tank Dell last year. Like he just on DraftKings, he just stayed the same price for like a 5-week stretch.
He did something to DraftKings that we don't know about. That's not talked about. I'm not sure what the story is there. The 30 for 30 is going to be quite revealing. What does Pittman maybe get a couple more targets? I know people kind of poo-pooed him, and last year with Minshew, and he was good with Minshew. With the thought process, I guess, is that Richardson's going to be running, therefore not passing, and Pittman's sort of overvalued. That's the thought I've seen thrown out there several times from people. Are you guys buying that? Can Pittman get 14, 15 targets if we're assuming Downs is not playing this game? Is that something we're considering? 6'8" on DK. He's going to get a fair bit of ownership as well. John, you have a thought as far as that situation? Elevate Mitchell a little bit, Downs out, maybe Pierce gets an extra target or so, but can Pittman just be an alpha on the field?
It's hard to parse because, again, Richardson played 4 games. They weren't even all in full, but at least with Minshew, that's how he got elevated to that wide receiver 1/2 status over the second half of the season. He averaged 6.5 more fantasy points per game with Minshew compared to Richardson, just because, again, of how poor Richardson was through the air and didn't get enough reps, in my opinion, to develop. So curious to hear Rich's thoughts, but I don't think I'd be in on Pittman on this one.
Yeah, I just don't see like the huge upside stance for him. I mean, Richardson entered the NFL with largely probably the worst passing profile we've ever seen a round 1 quarterback have. Mm-hmm. And he was equally matched that. It's fine for Richardson from his own fantasy stance, how he got there because of the, listen, that's my brand, Swami Economy. But like, dude, he completed 8% of his passes below expectations. It was the lowest rate in his league at his time of injury. He was 32nd out of 32 quarterbacks in completion rate. He was 40th in inaccurate target rate to wide receivers. And that's like all this stuff that like kind of folds in. It's like and he has not played a lot of football since high school. He didn't start a lot of games in college. He didn't start a lot of games as a rookie because he was hurt. And like, we just have no passing sample of Anthony Richardson as a successful thrower of the football yet. And so like it's always going to take that leap of faith, that step of faith until we get it. The first game of the year last year, Pittman was fine for fantasy. He had like a 30-yard screen. He caught a screen pass in house. I don't know if you guys remember, against the Jaguars. But if that's the type of stuff we have to rely on, that's hard for me to pay for. So yeah, I mean, I'm not really, I need more of Anthony Richardson being a successful passer. Now the Colts have put like everything in place, right? Like we seen when Anthony Richardson was in, they used no huddle at a 7% higher rate than they did with Gardner Minshew. Like they're going to play fast. That's what gives me that's what makes it tough. Cause I don't want to ignore this game, even not being able to totally sparse out what I think Houston's going to be able to do or who's going to get the targets, because I think the Colts are just going to run a lot of plays. So it's going to create that play volume. It's an indoor game. Like this is the game that could be the 33-30, or, even if we get some of it as garbage time, like there's going to be points scored in this game.
I believe too, Dean, like Derek Carty is highest on this game, both in Anthony Richardson points and volume across the market.
I have not fully dug into the blitz, but I can pull that up to confirm. But yeah, I do have access in it, and I can find that in just a second. But anything else as far as this game, or shall we move on and talk about our favorite quarterbacks, receivers, running backs, tight ends we've not yet discussed, and the games we've not yet discussed? You guys got anything else, or shall we move on? TJ, what do you got?
Pop in quick to say Michael Pittman Jr. is the highest rated point per dollar play in the blitz in terms of wide receivers this week. So Michael Pittman's number one for receivers, and Anthony Richardson's number one for running backs. For quarterbacks.
Wow, just fraudulent slip there.
I haven't dug into the Cardi stuff. I kind of look at both. I look and see what RG has as well, and that's the current projections ownership stuff I'm quoting right now.
I mean, it's like the Anthony Richard experience is gonna be tough when you watch it down to down, but the results are gonna be there because they're gonna have drives where like all the RPO, all this pace is working, and then there'll be like a 3-drive absence where it just looks like shit. Mm-hmm. And then there'll be 2 more drives where it's hot, it's all working. There's a big play. It's the down to down consistency. I don't think it's going to be there, but like the overall results through like play volume and just the immense amount of athleticism that he has. Like there's just you just keep getting there, man.
The Anthony Richardson experience sounds like a jazz trio or something like that.
You maybe not want to be invested. Like if you're one of those people that sweats every down, like of your dollar,
don't watch the game.
He's going to be tough. Yeah, I think he's going to be tough on you. Because you saw
Ricky Bobby, man.
Game,
he's
right?
got the ceiling.
That last preseason game, and granted, it's just preseason, whatever, but like the opening drive, they go on script, they destroy, everyone's going nuts. And then like it's the second string, and like he struggled, and like everyone thinks he's the worst quarterback ever. Like, right? It's like there's going to be a lot of that with the experience.
You could take his top 10 percentile plays and his bottom 10 percentile plays and make
But early career Josh Allen was like that. Like early career Josh Allen before he got Diggs was like that. And Josh Allen didn't have Shane Steichen. Like, and Shane Steichen is a guy I believe in. Like he gets it.
Mm-hmm. Daigle, are you drafting right now, by the way? Are you multitasking? Dude, I just pulled the 12, by the way. I'm very excited. I pulled the 12 in my draft that starts in a half hour. Lucky me.
I have literally been drafting for the last 30 minutes while doing the show, and hopefully it was good enough to where no one even noticed. Just it actually worked out where I'm at the turn in 2 drafts. So it's like I make my picks as quick as possible, jump back over, and then just talk.
That is impressive. Well, you're doing a great job on the show. I don't know how your team is looking, but you're doing a spectacular job multitasking.
It's super flex. The rule with super flex is serious. Get your one quarterback out of the way if you're at the front. If not, we're going to have fun with Levis, Darnold, and Bryce Young all year long.
Cross your fingers. All right. We're going to run it back as far as our favorite running backs in just a second. Do want to mention skip the trip to Vegas. Splash Sports hosts NFL Survivor pick'em pools every week, available in 34 states and Canada. Shout out TJ. Start with their $1 million Survivor pool in week 1. Pick one winning team each week for a chance to win $1 million. But remember to not use the same team twice. Join us in week 2 for the RotoGrinders Survivor Revival Tournament. Just $20 to enter with over $20,000 to be won. That's also plus RG premium prizes for the top 20. Go ahead, once again, check the links in our description for more details. Additionally, if you're looking for a plus EV contest this NFL season, our friends over at Action Network, they have one for you. Their podcast called The Favorites. It's bringing back their free NFL Pick'em contest this season. Totally free to sign up at favorites.actionnetwork.com. Just pick 5 picks against the spread every single week. Cash prizes for the top 10 finishes and $40,000 first prize. If you finish first, you get $40,000. $100K is a total prize pool. Thousands up for grabs every week. Again, totally free to play. Contest just went live. Just go to favorites.actionnetwork.com to sign up and compete for the $100,000 in the prize pool. All right, Rich, give me some quarterbacks we've not yet talked about you like in week 1.
All right, I'll do a couple ugly guys first. I'll start with Geno Smith. If you're looking to pay down, I know a lot of people will probably talk themselves into Darnold, but I just look at this spot for Geno Smith at home. Big, large favorite against this Denver team that was another passive defense that just really didn't add enough pieces objectively to believe it's going to make significant strides. And this is one, we have a similar system. Vance Joseph coming back this year as defensive coordinator. I mean, when Geno was kept clean last year, he was still awesome. When he was kept clean, he was 5th in the NFL in yards per pass attempt. He was 11th in completion rate. Now we're getting, Ryan Grubb. We're getting this healthier offensive line. Last year, the most frequent offensive line combination the Seahawks used was just 20% of their snaps. The Denver, they blitzed at the 4th highest rate in the NFL, but they only got pressure 36% of their blitzes, which was 27th in the league. We only had a very small sample this preseason, the Seattle stuff, but like they're going to just run a lot more motion, a lot more play action than they did under Shane Waldron. So at his price point, I just like the spot. He's a pivot off of Kenneth Walker. I also think you can include Jackson Smith and Jigba before we get there too. And then I'll leave some of these guys for Daigle, but I just want to mention Goff for FanDuel purposes because of where he's priced and because he might be overlooked because that game's later. Obviously, highest game total, maybe it won't go overlooked. But this Rams team losing Aaron Donald, you'll hear all these things about Goff, and Daigle knows about me because he's done shows with me for years. I don't care about the indoor-outdoor splits. What I care about is when Jared Goff plays is disruption. Can you put pressure on Jared Goff? When you move Jared Goff off his spot, he falls apart. This team now the Rams lose Aaron Donald from a team that was already 18th in pressure rate, 23rd in sack rate. They're counting on 2 rookies to generate pass rush. When these teams played in the playoffs last year, Goff threw for a season high in yards per pass attempt. He completed his highest percentage of throws. In that game where the Rams did not put pressure on Jared Goff, he was 19 of 19 passing for 13 yards per pass attempt. I mean, he's kind of priced in that spot where like people might just go down the 500 to Jaden Daniels, but I do want to just bring up Goff where he's priced because I think he's in a great spot.
And with Sam Laporta due for touchdown regression, you can just tack on those 100 yards with 3 extra points this year on FanDuel from Amon-Ra St. Brown and have that late night hammer stack.
Do we like Amon-Ra or Tyreek on FanDuel straight up? Not dealing with ownership or nothing like that. You have a lean, you have a preference, John?
I haven't tinkered with FanDuel yet. Is it still possible just to fit all of them?
No, like Dean said, it's still just spread out, right? Like because we don't have that guy that like we snuck through for like 4K or like that, right? Like Chuba Hubbard's the best probably dollar per salary running back just based on touches. And like, are you really excited to play him on the road against the Saints? You will maybe to fit in some of those guys, but it's kind of spread out.
Daniels is 7K over there. Caleb is 7-1.
Daniels is gonna be super popular on both sites. There's just no way around it.
Yeah,
and we can talk about it. I mean, just because listen, we're getting Jaden Daniels against Todd Bowles. Like we know what's happening in this game. His first career start. You think Todd Bowles is dialing up as many he's gonna be blitzing as the Commanders get off the plane in Tampa. Like, so I mean, we're potential high play volume, and Daniels isn't like Richardson. Like he actually enters the NFL with actual a passing background, right? Like this.
Yeah, it's been frustrating just to see any time someone's comp Jaden Daniels to Richardson. It's like, no, you're not allowed to do that. Like Daniels led the nation in yards from a clean pocket last year. Rich mentioned about Todd Bowles' blitz rate, especially after they lost. The Bucs did 3 key defenders, Shaq Barrett, Devin White, and Carlton Davis. I would imagine they just try to get their pressure through the blitz. And Daniels against the blitz last year, literally 10.9 yards per attempt. just crushed it.
He had the highest on target rate in college football against the blitz last year. And then you get an inherent stacking partner. Like this run out for Terry McLaurin and with the trade of Jahan Dotson, like we don't know who the hell they're going to be rotating in at receiver. It could be Diami Brown. It could be Luke McCaffrey. It could be Noah Brown off the street.
One of the Browns.
Like Daigle said, the Buccaneers still have Jamel Dean, but I mean, they're set up to play third-round pick Tyke Smith that's at nickelback, and then 2022 fifth-rounder Zion McCollum is going to be their other outside starting cornerback, and he had his the lowest pass coverage grade of any cornerback in the Bucs last year, so they're counting him to take a massive step up. I mean, Terry McLaurin, like we talked about, like he's priced the same as Tank Dell. Like, and against this Bucs Commanders game, we didn't do it, but I thought it was in the running. This one to me this got a lot of fun. This game's got a lot of fun potentially.
Again, we had to talk about the three big games, but another quarterback I wanted to talk about beyond Jaden Daniels, just because, again, he's going to be the cash play. I'm probably going to have to get off of in tournaments, but Baker Mayfield also. And we're going to see how far it's going to fall without Dave Canales. But remember, Washington led the league with the highest rate of explosive passes allowed last year. And they made a couple splash signings. Dorrance Armstrong follows Dan Quinn from Dallas. Frankie Louvu was a great run stopper in Carolina when he was available. Bobby Wagner as well, who played under Quinn in Seattle. But again, those guys I just mentioned, none of them play in the secondary. We're still going to get Mike Evans on Emmanuel Forbes and in man coverage a lot of the time. Not to mention Chris Godwin returning to the slot. I still do question, like Reeves and Curtis Samuel, I question how much of Godwin's production and increased yards per route run from the slot are because he also played with the second greatest quarterback of all time in Tom Brady.
Maybe that positive.
Maybe that was why Godwin was so good from the slot those 3 years. But again, it's a pretty clean run out for Baker Mayfield, too. Do I have the courage now to run out Baker with this list of quarterbacks we talked about? I don't know, but it's a good matchup. It's going to go over the total.
He's really cheap. 5.6 is the price there. You kind of mentioned both names. Do you have a lean? Do you have a preference? Or you're just not really sure as far as Evans or Godwin, Daigle? Who you want to pair him with?
Oh, it's still Evans. Dan Quinn of the Cowboys still played a ton of man coverage last year, and we know a lot like Nico Collins, although you can get there in doing both. Mike Evans is someone that when you just leave him out there on an island by himself, he's going to spike you. So I'm probably just going to one-off Mike Evans regardless of what I do with this game. He's one of my favorite players on the week. But again, there's a lot of receivers, and they're expensive. I just think we're going to hopefully get Mike Evans at a little bit of lower ownership. And then I didn't get there. I'm not going to get there, but let's still talk about Derek Carr for a second because like rushing quarterbacks and that being Rich's lane, shitty quarterbacks are still my lane in this show.
So, it's a hell of a lane to claim. Less traffic in that lane.
To be fair, though, a majority of games last year, remember, sheep quarterback won just because of what DFS has become and trying to fit the Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lambs of the world. So you did need a shitty quarterback. And let's just talk about Derek Carr quickly because for his career, including going back to Las Vegas, his last 4 games against Panthers defense coordinator Ejiro Evero, yes, he struggled mightily, just 6.3 yards per attempt in those 4 contests. But it's a situation where given his ceiling games last year and going over 300 yards at least 5 times last year, maybe you just hold your nose. Maybe you just close your eyes and say, it's no longer Pete Carmichael. It's now Clint Kubiak. We're hopefully getting at least a league average rate of play action and pre-snap motion here so I can double stack him with Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, and then no one will bat an eye at my collective like 11 to 14% ownership, especially if you believe in Canales elevating that game since he already saved Geno Smith's career and gave Baker Mayfield a $100 million contract single-handedly last year.
We're not afraid of Taysom Hill siphoning stuff at the goal line, or even
we're
just
afraid
like
of every
quarterback.
We're afraid of everything in that game, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe you get
also
there with
we got to bring
Taysom,
who's a tight end on FanDuel.
How much is it?
He's 5.5 on FanDuel.
Pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think he's totally in play, especially on this slate, because they've talked him up. They've literally gone out of their way to talk about how much he's going to be involved in this offense the whole offseason. And last year he had a career high in touches, and he's facing a team that last year allowed the most rushing touchdowns in the NFL and the highest rate of touchdowns to be on the ground. So, I mean, he has to kind of be on the board, I think, on FanDuel where he's priced.
What about 4-3 on DK?
What's that?
4-3 on DK.
Is he tight end there?
Yeah.
Oh, he is. I didn't know.
Oh,
Oh, did they move him? At first, I didn't think he was, so I didn't even put him on my list because I didn't think he was eligible.
yeah.
Let me confirm because that's what
No,
I see in the live space.
Producer TJ also confirming 4-3, also known as $200 less than Gabe Davis in week 1. Taysom Hill at tight end. And that's
I like him more in non-PPR, but I mean, I'm not going to push back on anyone. I think he's got to kind of be at least in the mix.
Especially because I know the Sims are jamming Kyle Pitts. I know everyone's getting Kyle Pitts anytime you run a simulator out there.
Yeah,
he's fine. He's one of those guys that he's fine. Don't worry about it. Now,
I'm going to worry about. Don't worry about Kyle Pitts. It's famous last words.
Will he beat Kyle Pitts? I can't help you there, but he's going to play.
He's going to show up for the Arthur Smith revenge game. That's going to happen.
But that game in general, Dean, you made it's funny as you made like a flippant comment earlier. You're like, I'm not going to play much of the Saints Panthers, but I actually think that's one of the ugly spots because there's so many changes for those two offenses. Mm-hmm. And if we wait to get them all revealed, like it might be too late. Like, what about on this slate where people are just like, whatever, it's Saints, it's Panthers, I've got Dolphins, I've got Jaguars, I got Bill, all these teams we ran off. But the price point for all these guys is so low. And with these changes are just really good for all. Obviously, Dave Canales has turned water into wine out of Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield in back-to-back years. They invest heavily into the offensive line. They get a wide receiver that's shown that he creates separation, that can get open. So they've got some kind of, upside there. But then I'm particularly interested in this Clint Kubiak addition on the Saints side because the Saints were dead last in the NFL last year in rate of play action. They were dead last in the NFL in use of pre-snap motion. And again, grain of salt, small sample in the preseason, but we saw that completely flip. On Derek Carr's dropbacks in the preseason, Chris Olave has targeted on 8 of them. But more importantly, we saw all of that usage change. They were using, a ton of play action and they used pre-snap motion on almost every play. And Chris Olave so far in the sample he's been through 2 years in the NFL, only Tyreek Hill averaged more yards per out run with pre-snap motion than Chris Olave. He's going to have a lot more easy buttons in this offense than they were when the Saints offense was structured around, Derek Carr taking moon balls to Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave, and they were inefficient targets. Chris Olave is going to have some more fantasy smoothing type of targets this season against the defense that we still have a lot of questions about. They will get JC Horn back, which is nice, but they trade away their best pass rusher this offseason. That's not looking good on paper. So I'm interested in running some minis here. I don't know if Daigle might get to either of the quarterbacks in that game, but I think something like Olave plus Deontay, maybe with Taysom as like a mini, definitely kind of I'm interested in.
There's no Brian Burns traded to the Giants, starting secondary players, Dane Jackson, Xavier Woods, I believe are both going to miss this one as well. And I'm not going to do it in single entry, of course, especially when we start talking the high stakes one line I'm going to run across the board. But, if throwing in 25 into the Millie Maker, just having fun, I'm definitely going to have a little bit of Derek Carr, especially because like Jaden Daniels and Mike Evans, I'm pretty confident in the only player to run it back with in Carolina's passing game.
Yes. There's a chance where Deontay Johnson, he gets 150 targets, 160 targets pretty easily this year.
I did a long shot bet, Rich, on Deontay leading the league in catches. Again, long shot, but there's a real chance there.
That's you probably got 100 to 1 or something like that. A big number.
Oh yeah, much further. I need to look up a book, but I have 2 drafts going on, so we don't have time for that.
But I remember last year though, entering the year, if you're sitting here week 1 like we were last year, there's no way you thought the Buccaneers were going to be good. No one was out here saying anything positive about the Buccaneers. And they ended up being a team that we kind of leaned on in fantasy, especially in DFS with Rachaad White consistently being undervalued for a large part of the season. And Mike Evans was the reverse Stephon Diggs last year. Remember where Stephon Diggs did nothing for 8 weeks and every week we would come on and be like, why isn't Diggs' price going down? And then every week Mike Evans would have a 60-yard touchdown and we'd be like, why didn't his price go up?
DraftKings, I didn't play in much Superflex. I was trying to knock out all my 3 maxes and single entries. But in any drafters or underdog league, I was just definitely waiting till the 7th or 9th round for Bryce Young in those formats. And then Dean, I know you maxed out on DraftKings. I think the Millie Maker. Even in a spot like there, we get the bonuses. So we probably should be prioritizing 3 quarterbacks. I still didn't get to Bryce Young much, but that's only because like Trevor Lawrence just always went way too late in DraftKings drafts.
I got a little bit. I got a taste, as a backdoor, last second to stack. If you don't feel like you have enough stacks or something like that, I was okay with it. By the way, Rich, you mentioned it. Who's the team that we think is bad that's going to be good this year? Who's the most likely candidate for that?
My personal opinion is it's going to be the Titans, but
okay,
you think the Titans will be bad?
No, I think they're
good.
No, I think that they're going to be the team where we look back and they were kind of largely just as a team underpriced.
What about you? You got a team, John?
I'm still worried about their the Titans like first 3 games. It's tough passing defenses for them to play, man.
Yeah.
But after that, it's on. I think Seattle, maybe that's not even a hot take. I don't know, but I think
Seattle has talent.
They're just going to be like Mike McDonald basically only took Kyle Hamilton. I know they have other good players, but he pretty much only took Kyle Hamilton and made a historically great defense last year. So much so that we still don't know Lamar Jackson's ceiling in a Todd Monken offense. But now he goes to Seattle. And like I mentioned, he already carried some elite coverage linebackers with him. He arrived and he has 2 shutdown corners and Reek Woolen and Devin Witherspoon there. Like, dude, Mike McDonald's he's going to fuck shit up, man. Like, it's so scary there in Seattle.
Yeah, they just need if the offensive line is adequate for them, I think that they're going to be they're just going to be like in contention in the NFC because the NFC doesn't run deep enough.
Jackson at the Jigba is not going to be used like Wan'Dale Robinson. Everything's going to be okay.
Several people in chat are saying the Cardinals, by the way, including producer TJ.
Yeah, I'm for that. We're big pet thing believers. I don't think we'd push back on that vote at all.
What's the inverse?
I think this is what.
Give me the inverse.
Ooh. Do you have one, Daigle? I don't really have one off the top of my head yet. Maybe at the peak.
No,
maybe
because
Cincinnati.
I still think
Dallas?
yeah. I mean,
Dallas.
Dallas definitely is very fragile, but they only have one player we care about anyways. Like if Dallas sucks, we're gonna be like, whatever.
If the Jets' schedule weren't so easy, I would like alt bet.
That's kind of why the Bengals shout though. The Bengals, especially the close the season, their schedule is rough. They have our 32nd ranked passing schedule projected, and Burrow in his career has a 33% QB1 rate in AFC North games and a 54% QB1 rate in non-AFC North games. And Chase goes 1-1. Like with that, like Chase has only been a wide receiver 1 in 5 of 15 games in AFC North games. They suck against the Browns. Like they've been terrible against the Browns. And now granted, Mike McDonald's gone, but Mike McDonald has been in like Burrow's bag the last 2 years. So like, at least he's gone for the Ravens matchup to maybe be better.
The Jets are just a house of cards of veteran players who, like any team that tries to do a lot of scattered 1-year deals, you just have to cross your fingers and hope it works out. It never does, but like the Arrested Development meme, maybe for us.
I guess the Bills would be maybe the other team you would say, like could have like a Chiefs-esque season of last year, like where like the offense just isn't very pretty because, this is certifiably on paper the worst collective group of talent Josh Allen's had since probably 2019.
And I don't have
he's gonna
faith.
Make it work probably, but we'll see.
We're just gonna keep talking about this, Dean, because like our jobs are better when everyone's good. So that's what I want. I want everyone to be competitive. But it's fun because like you could poke holes also in like the Jaguars offensive line and maybe Trevor Lawrence. Like, although again he got really unlucky last year with drop deep passes, maybe he isn't that guy. But we're already in an era where the AFC South is fun as hell. Like those matchups are going to be so great.
Do we think Chase is playing this week, by the way? What are our expectations? We don't
I'll
know.
Just let the world
I don't know.
Me. I'm not going to consider it. Listen, I don't think they're going to need Jamar Chase to play this week. It's the larger thing.
There's always one upset out of nowhere. I was staring at my Survivor.
Are you picking that one?
My Survivor pick, I kind of split it up. I have several teams. I know I'm hedging, but I think Seattle is one of my Survivor teams this week, and probably the Bengals, just because the Patriots are probably, just terrible. I mean, if everybody universally just assumes they're going to be horrific.
If you don't use Seattle,
if Chase does sit, Yoshivas will be the most popular DFS play of the weekend. Yeah, I think he's min on DK.
T.
I know
Higgins
he's
is expensive too.
He's 3K on DK. I don't know what he has on FanDuel, but he's going to be probably the most popular play if Chase is out.
Gosh, I wanted to play Joe Burrow just because, like, again, we do this show every year, and welcome to new listeners, but we talk about Joe Burrow and how amazing he is against the blitz every year. And the Patriots last year, 5th highest blitz rate, and the preseason, the 8th highest blitz rate, a negative difference in their percentage rate. But like, who the hell is going to push back in New England? Like, they're going to get 0 points on the board, and then they could just protect Burrow, Zach Taylor can, the rest of the game. Otherwise, I think Burrow would be a fun play this week.
All right, getting the show back on the rails. It falls off on occasion. That's just how it goes. Our apologies, but like, hey, we're going to give you like 2 hours of content this week.
I mean, listen. Let's talk about the 35 wide receivers that are playable on this slate.
Wide receivers are on deck. We haven't knocked out our favorite.
But did we
running
skip
backs.
one?
Yeah, we haven't. We have not done running backs that we've not yet discussed. John, that is yours. Set the table as far as RBs.
I feel like I should take more, but honestly, we talked about a lot of the ones that I think I'm interested in, if only because, again, in tournaments, I'm trying to leverage off of the offenses we believe will be very high rostered. Unfortunately, Jonathan Taylor is going to be high rostered himself, so there's not really a way to do that around him. Having said that, I mentioned Derek Carr, so it only makes sense to mention Alvin Kamara, who has had a pretty clean run out. Like, he continues to go down in his rate of explosive runs and become a more inefficient player every year. But speaking in the way of, like, we just don't know, we at least know that Kamara is a player who earns targets. 7 targets per game last year, the highest target share at his position. Kendry Miller on the PUP list now. Jamal Williams only averaged 6 touches per game behind Kamara last year. So at least on DK, I will gladly take that target share. Rich, go ahead. Add some more.
No, we probably covered most of them.
John's on the clock, by the way. John's on the clock.
John's on the clock. Yeah,
I'm guessing. I don't know, but I'm guessing.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm on the clock. It's ticking down.
Well,
what's up with that, Rich?
I've hinted that I think throughout the week, when you listen to this show and other shows, the guy that's going to consistently get name dropped the most is Kenneth Walker, and he will gain steam as the week goes on. Obviously, home game, 5-point favorites against the Broncos. I think we'll get there with like pretty high ownership on him in context of the slate. I think Aaron Jones is a little bit interesting in kind of that soft price zone too. Just as I think that game has potential for points to be scored as well. I wish it was in Minnesota versus New York, but early in the season, we're not really concerned, like you said, the indoor-outdoor stuff. I do think he's going to have an opportunity to be really involved as a pass catcher in this game because both Jordan Addison and Jalen Naylor are dealing with ankle injuries. We obviously know there's no TJ Hawkinson in this game as well. So I do like Aaron Jones a little bit too, more on DraftKings than FanDuel, but I do think there's an opportunity for him. He was the best running back the last 5 weeks in the NFL last season.
Oh, yeah.
Like last time we saw Aaron Jones on a football field, he was outplaying Christian McCaffrey. And
they traded him for Josh Jacobs.
That was kind of like weird, like thing dominoes that kind of happened, but yeah. But I do like Aaron Jones as another guy. The rest of, like Dean said, like it's hard to find like the super cheapies. I am trying to talk myself into Jaleel McLaughlin, but I don't know if I'm going to get there. Like, just as like the cheapest bring back in that game with Pirine being gone is there a pathway for McLaughlin now to have value? I'm worried that there's just no touchdown upside with McLaughlin, and that's why it's hard to get to him. But the price is good. He's super cheap on both sides.
Yeah, he's 4-3 on DK. Yeah, I don't know how necessary.
Because I would get to Javonte, because I think that you can equally say like Javonte's in a spot, but like being the road, like it's the same thing with Connor, right? It's just hard to back a road underdog of more like those are just spots where we inherently know to kind of at least price in. Like we shouldn't probably be all in on that spot.
Is he the catch-up guy if the Denver's down like 14?
We don't know. We don't know. The dude played 8 snaps in pass protection last year. Like who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. That's why I was gonna try to sneak in Khalil Herbert because, as we know, last year, same head coach, and Herbert was the guy whenever they built a strong lead, and he was the one who got the carries. But again, DeAndre Swift prioritized over Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry on the open market. Not only that, but maybe the Titans, although I'm down on them and a little bit in week 1 because I'm so high on the Bears defense, maybe they are frisky enough under Callahan to still move the ball. They at least showed in the preseason they were willing to give Will Levis a pitching wedge and say, hey, like, you don't have to launch it every time. Like, you can just knock it 80 yards down the fairway, and it's okay to lay yourself up. So that game could be fun too.
But if you're in large fields, you've got a few of those spots. The Dallas running backs, like no one's going to play those guys.
Just going to ask about them.
They're going to want to see cards revealed. Like people are going to want to know. So if you are in like large field, like Millie Maker type stuff, like those are like the shots you're going to have to take, right? Kind of that area where you're talking about. It is interesting too, though, that the one guy we talked about, and like we didn't really touch on him a lot though. ETN, like his projected ownership in a game that we talked about all the points that we scored, like is probably going to be the most overlooked guy and like a potential cash spot, right?
I think so. I think that's most likely the case. You mentioned Daigle at 4-6. I don't know if this is a spot you want to find out. Maybe just get some information.
It's got to be large field, right? Like it's got to be wide open.
For sure.
Yeah, I would argue it is a spot you want to find out. Like there's probably not a better spot at 4-6 in week 1 before they call up Dalvin Cook when they go back to Dallas next week, but large field only.
Yeah, and I don't know how you're going to get to either of these Chargers guys, though. I mean, I actually think the Raiders' run D is going to be probably a lot better this year, although it may not matter against, Harbaugh-Roman conglomerate. But with adding Christian Wilkins with Max Crosby is a pretty big deal in the front. That's a lot for even a team that's made upgrades in the offensive line to deal with.
Yeah, I'm probably not messing too much with Edwards, Dobbins.
One wild card we didn't talk about, though, in that game, that Commanders game, is Austin Eckler on DK. Because he's another guy that I think because the horizontal rate is coming, guys. The horizontal rate is back. It's back in the NFL. And there's
I love the horizontal rate.
We don't know if there even is a wide receiver 2 on the Commanders. We know people will get to McLaurin 1 because they're going to play Daniels, and people, if they play a quarterback, always look for a stack. And then there's no competition. But guys like Eckler and Zach Ertz are just super cheap, and road dogs they could get peppered. Like it could be a game where you get 8 Austin Eckler targets. I know that the ghost of Zach Ertz is going to be out there, man.
5 catches, 5 yards for Zach Ertz, 5.5 DK points incoming.
Oh, yeah.
And if he falls in the end zone, all of a sudden you're at 11.5 fantasy points for 5
catches. That's large field stuff. But but that's fun. That's week 1 stuff, man.
You want to give us some receivers, Rich?
I just gave a bunch of running backs. We did Evans, we did McLaurin. I do want to say, Neighbors. I mean, Neighbors on both sites. I mean, we've seen it. Just a small sample, right? He ran 25 routes in the preseason, was targeted on 25% of them. When Daniel Jones was in the game, he had 35% of the team targets and also 46% of the air yards and had 3.2 yards per out run. Again, small sample stuff, but Minnesota was a soft defense against wide receiver 1s last year. We know they're good against the run too. Like the Vikings were really good against the run. So Neighbors, I just think has a shot to just be like that blend of just volume and upside potential. So Neighbors is probably going to be the dude I play the most on this slate.
He's going to be popular. A lot of people are going to be playing him. I'm seeing him at 18% right now. Just the price, like you said earlier, probably not priced where he's going to be in week 7, week 8. You possibly might never see him this cheap again. 5.9 currently on DK, probably also landing in a bunch of cash lineups. What do you have, John, as far as some receivers we've not yet discussed? I know we've kind of bounced around and thrown different positions out as the conversation progresses, but who have we missed here, John?
All of us, including us on this show, are just filling out week 1. So we're allowed to, go around the board and talk about every situation as much as we can. My highest played receiver in week 1 will be Deontay Johnson. Led the Steelers in target share every season. Also last year when he was on the field with George Pickens, still boxed out Pickens with a 23% target per out run rate to Pickens 19.5%. Still just very good, it turns out, at straight up earning targets. And there's nowhere else for the Panthers to go, especially after Adam Thielen. Like, I don't think people remember, but like after those first 6 games before Carolina's bye, Adam Thielen was basically dust. Yeah, he passed 75 yards 1 time over the stretch, became closer to a wide receiver 4 or 5 than the wide receiver 9 in points per game he was. And so we can just bank on Deontay Johnson, regardless if we skinny stack or in Millie Makers play Derek Carr across from the Saints offense. And then, we know the situation that's happening, but I'll still probably get a little higher on T. Higgins Don't know what I would do with Yoshi Voss and large field tournaments, probably spread my exposure if Chase is out. But T. Higgins has still literally been an amazing play whenever Chase has been out. He's made 5 career games starts now without Chase in the lineup, and he's averaged 14.5 points per game and 95 yards per game. So although he's expensive, he's still a player I want to play if everyone's just instead going to run to the Stone Men option and Yoshi Voss.
Odunze is only 4K, but I think that's kind of sort of interesting. Where do we expect him? Daigle? I know Chicago, you got the ears as far as what's going on there with the Bears. Is he well behind Moore and Allen, or not necessarily behind Allen?
Again, it comes down to what you expect this game to do. I really worry about the Titans' passing offense in this one. With DeAndre Hopkins limited on Wednesday as well, I think really the play is like Calvin Ridley if you're going to do anything with the Bears, because I would imagine like Callahan did with Jamar Chase all those years, and no matter what the defense did, Callahan would just always figure it out. He'd bring him closer to the line of scrimmage. He'd give him screens if he needed to. He'd run him more slants. I do think that's how he's going to treat Ridley. And so, like, I'm expecting double-digit targets for Ridley in this game. But on the opposite side of the ball, I do believe the Bears are just kind of going to put it on the Titans, since after Mike Vrabel releasing him previously, they always were able to turn chicken shit into chicken salad. I don't know if they can do that anymore in Tennessee without Vrabel. So
I got a trivia question for you guys.
Sure.
Love it. Who was the last number 1 pick to win their week 1 debut at quarterback?
Whew.
Sam Bradford.
You got to go back further.
Behind Bradford. Like how far back are we going?
You got to go back to where the NFL introduced their 32nd team. David Carr.
Oh, wow.
Is the last number 1 pick to win. Since 2010, number 1 draft picks are 0-9-1 in week 1, 1-8 against the spread, 1-8-1. And a couple of those guys have actually been favorites. Most recently, Trevor Lawrence, the year when everyone thought the Texans were going to be like dog shit, and they kind of were, but they beat the Jags in week 1. So, I mean, it's open. Like these spots, like where like we expect Jaden Daniels to be good for fantasy. We expect Caleb Williams. This is a different spot than typical number 1 picks have gone into, but like it's a guy's first start in the NFL. Like things happen, right? Like, so like,
it's also concerning why I bet the Commanders plus 3.5, because I think they're just going to win that game. But I also understand it's a rookie under center. I do get it.
Yeah, I mean, things are it's just wild cards. Like these things, you know, it's the NFL, it's top survey. The Titans are just like we talked about all their changes on offense. They have a ton of changes defensively as well. They brought in a lot of bodies, the capable bodies too. Like that defense has talent on paper, but will it be enough? We'll see. Let's talk about some more. We know what they're going to
do on offense. We knew what they're going to do on offense, though. Like they're going to pass the hell out of the ball.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, the other weird thing too is like everyone's so excited about the Bears, but like it's still Shane Waldron and Matt Eberflus. Like, if you're talking about 2 guys that can mess something up, if 2 guys can mess up a good thing, it's those 2.
John, more importantly, is Jaden Daniels going to run for more or less than 38.5 yards
against Todd Bowles?
I would.
Well, he's going to be on the move, right? We like the over, don't we?
Yeah,
that's what I was hearing you say before without saying it.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I said everything. Yeah, I like Jaden Daniels in general.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the maybe the alt lines as well too. You got
his rushing prop is 38.5.
Yeah, maybe we'll hit that one before.
If you do want to bet the Jahmyr Gibbs longest rush again, it is available.
Is it back in play? That you would hit that every single time, right? 12 or 11? What was it?
It opened at 14.5. I think 14. It's light, but we'll see. He's coming off the preseason hammy, but I feel like on principle, the hit rate that it had last year, I'm obligated to bet it out of the box again.
I thought you retired on that. You hit that like you
were
like reverse martingale.
I've the numbers. I bet it 14 weeks in a row, and it won 13 of the 14 weeks.
It's amazing. And they closed shop week 15, right? They said,
they did. They didn't even post it. They were like, we're not even putting it up.
Okay.
So we gave it out of sight. I have 2 more receivers.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, one, you got to have someone with Geno, and I have no problem if you want to get DK, but I do think that it's going to be night and day usage for what we saw of Jackson Smith-Njigba, how he was utilized as a rookie to how he will be utilized in this offense under Ryan Grubb. I mean, you look at last year, 6.1 air yards per attempt. It was 25th out of 27 rookie wide receivers. 35% of Jackson Smith-Njigba's targets last year were at or behind the line of scrimmage. It was the highest rate of any NFL wide receiver to have 50 or more targets. For the context of the wide receivers that had 50 or more targets, the average rate of throws at or behind the line of scrimmage for that group was 10.7%. He was triple the base rate. This is a guy that when he did get opportunities downfield, though, was good as a rookie. When targeted 10 or more yards downfield as a rookie, he converted a first down on 58% of his targets. That was the wide receiver 16, of that group. So, I mean, he's another guy, we're going to see probably Patrick Surtain and get across from DK Metcalf pretty often. So he's priced at a nebulous spot. And I've got one guy that nobody's going to play.
All right. I want to hear it.
Nobody wanted to draft this guy.
Put him with Derek Carr and get collective 3% ownership.
Not well. I wish we could.
What's the price range? Give me the price range.
He's higher priced too. That's why no one's going to play him. We could have sacked him with Derek Carr 2 years
Jefferson?
ago. No, Jefferson's going to be played. People are going to play Jefferson because people are going to play
Darnold. Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, Devontae Adams.
That's a good call. I don't want to play him.
The only wide receiver that had a higher and accurate target rate last year was Hollywood Brown. He's now switching from Aiden O'Connell, who had the 31. He ranked 31st in an accurate target rate to wide receivers, to Gardner Minshew, who we just talked about what he did for Michael Pittman, was 16th of that same group. I mean, he is absolutely, and not to bring up BVP in the NFL, but I'm going to. Like, Devontae Adams has absolutely eviscerated the Chargers. His last 4 games, since joining the Raiders, 10 for 141-1, 8 for 177-2, 8 for 75, 8 for 101-1, 12 or more targets in all those games. There is not a player that you're going to get sub 5% ownership on at wide receiver this weekend that's going to have the projectable amount of volume that he has. I'm just going to let Target Jesus take the wheel. No one's going to play him, man. Nobody wanted to draft him and redraft this year. Because remember, the mindset for DFS gamers a lot in week 1 is coming off of that, and they're setting like how we drafted players, right? Like there's a lot of that gets that from draft season that gets bled into these takes of week 1.
Do you have the sack to play him like in a single entry? Because he's going to be 3 or 4% in like
on FanDuel, especially where he's
maybe
he's 7,500 on FanDuel,
and you get bonuses now.
You get bonuses
now.
Yeah, I've heard rumors.
I do. I'm going to play him. I don't care.
Wow.
No one's coming with me. There's no one's coming with me.
You and the Goldfish and Jerry Maguire are playing Devontae Adams. All right, Daigle, give me some tight ends.
I don't know what the cash game option is, so I don't know what I'm saying here, but I'm going to play a lot of Trey McBride, especially if we're thinking negative game script. The matchup is good, as we talked about earlier. Again, the Sims are jamming Kyle Pitts on DraftKings, and I will never follow ownership on DraftKings, but if it was not to happen that way, I'm still going to close my eyes and bet on the change in routes, perhaps the change in game planning that they use Kyle Pitts differently. Hopefully, since 2021 when he was drafted, he's led every tight end in depth of target as opposed to being used over the middle of the field like an Evan Ingram got. Evan Ingram, by the way, who we didn't even really mention in that Jaguars game, and is also a great play since, again, Miami lost.
He's going to be the highest owned tight end on the slate.
That's what I have too.
Which is wild. Okay, never mind. Which is wild because of his splits when Kirk played.
So you think he might be bad chalk?
I mean, yeah, I do think he's probably if we're going off of like how he played with Kirk the last 2 years. I mean, it's 2 years running where Evan Ingram's been a worse player with Christian Kirk on the field. He didn't even catch a touchdown with Kirk on the field last year on that same time.
We got Ingram at 21%, Kincaid at 13 on DK. Pitts.
Do you think that is that just price and game environment though?
I mean, I
guess not because he's the same price as McBride.
And again,
he's the same price as McBride on FanDuel.
Game environment, like as you said, ETN's not getting anything right now.
But like spending up on one of the guys, right? This is the list on DK: Ingram, Kincaid, Pitts, McBride, Ferguson, Bowers, Njoku, like all like legit tight ends. Basically, they're telling you you should probably spend on one of them. Obviously, later on in the year, when we're pinching pennies, might be struggling, and like Johnny Smith season or whoever. But as of right now, it looks like we're probably gonna be spending up on one of these tight ends, at least for our cash games.
All right, well, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You got it.
I was going to say Noah Fant as well. The Broncos, although no one remembers that despite getting that 50 burger put on them against the Dolphins, like after that, their defense became what it should have been all year long. It just took them like 6 weeks to click under Sean Payton. Having said that, they still allowed a league high in fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends, and Noah Fant presumably no longer has that 55 and 60% snap rate he's had the last 2 years, since both Will Dissly and Colby Parkinson are now gone. Noah Fant somehow also only 26. He's going to be 26 in like 2030 as well, but still young and elite athlete. Will gladly latch on to Noah Fant at low ownership. And then I thought the cash game play was going to be Johnny Munt, personally, just for being a cheap option.
Whoa.
who's running routes, and you just get to eat it. Since last year, that's who ran all the routes in place of T.J. Hawkinson for those last handful of games. But again, apparently everyone's latching on to Kyle Pitts instead. So if you just let me eat a spot like with Johnny Munt at tight end, I'll gladly do it for cheap.
Is he better than Theo Johnson? I can't believe I'm asking this question. Is he better than Theo Johnson?
He's going to play more. He's going to play a lot more.
Long term, I don't think so. But also, who cares when you're in a Kevin O'Connell offense and running every route?
I think he had 13 targets his last 2 games, Johnny Munt. The last 2 games.
Like 9 catches, 97 yards, and a touchdown, I believe it was, in plays of Hawkinson.
Yeah, so I mean, you're at least going to get some targets. He had 13 targets last 2 games. If you're going to get it. I mean, who gets more targets, Munt or Zach Ertz?
Yeah.
and
then Naylor might be limited too. There's a chance he misses, which a little bit more might shuffle to Munt.
You also still then have to ask who scores more fantasy points.
I mean, we're talking about pump plays. If Daigle's talking themselves into Bryce Young, I mean, Jatavian Sanders had a nice run out in terms of usage. He just didn't get any targets, but he ran a route on 7 of Bryce Young's 9 dropbacks.
Is he ahead of Tremble, or it's like a 1 and 1A situation?
I just told you. Well, I mean, it could mean nothing, but he ran a route on 7 of the 9 dropbacks.
Trimble may not play. I think they promoted a tight end from their practice squad today because I believe Trimble is inching closer to doubtful.
Okay, so maybe he's the punt, Sanders, in the dome there against New Orleans. He supposedly has like real talent, right? He can actually give you a little bit of yak as opposed to Zach Ertz.
Interesting that TJ's saying that the Oliver's projected for Munt. Even in the preseason, Munt played on Darnold's dropbacks over Oliver. I mean, we're talking garbage plays here. You do get Parkinson on FanDuel. FanDuel, you can play Parkinson because you get the night game, like just a guy that's going to be out there in a high scoring game. Like, just hope he scores a touchdown.
Ingram also looking like the guy on FanDuel, 24% currently.
I think he's the highest played guy, which I think is wild, given the actual splits, which I could pull up and give to you. So he ran 329 routes last year with Kirk on the field. On those routes, he was targeted on 20.7%, 1.4 yards per route run, 283 routes with Kirk off the field. Target rate went up to 26.5%, 1.76 yards per route run. It goes back to also 2022 when Kirk was on the field. He only had an 18% target per route run rate the year before with Kirk on the field too. So it's pretty consistent. It makes sense because where those guys get their targets, they cannibalize each other, right? It makes sense when one guy's out and the other guy gets elevated. Ingram essentially is a slot receiver. He's a slot, so it makes sense. I mean, for me, I'm playing Kincaid. I have no problem with McBride.
Love that.
And then I'm gonna play some Taysom. There's just no way I'm not.
Yeah, he's gonna pat the 2 cheap touchdowns. Like he can do that. It'll really piss off Derek Carr owners or Alvin Kamara owners. That's just how it's gonna go. But I think and he's cheap enough, right? I just touchdown oriented on FanDuel is probably not gonna get those 100 yards, but you never know what they're gonna do with him. He can catch a couple passes. He can run some stuff in. I'm gonna have some some as well.
Listener League, right? We're doing Listener League this year?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I will play several of those guys I named.
There you go.
Man of my word.
And it's not a collective ownership, right, Dean? Like we are actually putting our own lineups in and then we total the scores. Is that how it works?
You know what? I'm not sure. It might be one all inclusive. It just,
I mean,
I got to figure that out.
Is that for the listener league?
Yeah, I believe. Well, that's the thing. That's a different conversation from our movie conversation, which I think we might be submitting one collective lineup for the listener league, and then one individual one for our movie deal.
Oh, okay, yeah. Let's keep the movie thing separate.
We're doing that. I think we're doing that.
I know people who like still listen to the show, but then tune out for the movies, which is okay.
Yeah,
everyone can have their segment of the show. Since again, we said we had a hard out at 2 hours, and for any
TJ
other show,
is producing the show all year. We got another guy.
That's true.
He's going to be excited to talk movies with us as well. And I know producer Rob sometimes crashes.
He can pick the movie. He can play in the league and pick the movie if he wins too.
TJ also kindly dropped that listener league link in the YouTube chat as well. If you guys are still with us
come
on YouTube, come take us down. And again, I got to make sure how that works.
I'm going to play Devontae Adams for sure in that lineup.
I'm going to play Derek Carr in the listener league, 100%.
I'm going to be like a chalk donkey, right?
Dean always. You go to Dean's listener league lineup, and it's like all the most popular.
He takes it so seriously. Yeah,
I love it.
Well, I want to finish last.
Dean's
I want to be in the podium,
baby. Yeah, tell him, Dean, you're all gas. All gas.
I want to be on the podium, right? I don't want to finish dead last.
You look at my lineup every week. It had Desmond Ridder and just stacking all the wide receivers. Like, yeah,
respect. I think that's the show, though, boys. Unless we got anything else, any sort of final like favorite play, favorite stack, if you want.
Oh man, we named everyone in the NFL. We talked about every player.
We literally did talk about every game.
Johnny Munt got a shout out as well, but the people know. I assume they know, but maybe they don't. Maybe we have some new people this year. Who's this John Daigle character? Who's this Rich Hribar character? Let them know where they can find you. John, tell them the socials.
I'm looking at the NFL schedule to see if we actually talked about every game, and I think we did. Even like hinting that the Jets are going to win on Monday night. So yeah, unfortunately, you got every single situation from us, and you can find more of that at Establish the Run, where I am splitting matchups with Evan Silva this year. The weekly waiver column, buy, sell also starts next week too. So a lot going on over there, which I'm sure a lot of people are already subscribers to.
I did not know you were going to be splitting up the matchups. Evan must be thrilled to get a reprieve.
I'm not kidding. He texted me like just a game during this show on top of everything else that was going on. I look at my text and he just had a game. I took it only because he said, "Hey, Jaguars, Dolphins," and I was like, "Yeah, that's easy. I could do that right now."
we just talked about it.
I did it for the show. Yeah, exactly.
Rich, tell the people where they can find you, find your stuff.
I'm still over at sharpfootballanalysis.com. Still cranking the worksheet, writing up every game in depth. If you want to go to start the year, you can use promo code week1, 77% off any weekly package. Take 25 for anything, 25% off for seasonal stuff out of the gate for any listeners here. Looking forward to just like these games, right? Like we said, like week one is, I'm ready to not come in with any conviction. I'm ready to adjust and calibrate to kind of what the new NFL is showing us. Ready to see some cards revealed. And hopefully, Devontae Adams scores a touchdown.
An hour and 45 minutes. Always the sharps smash the over. Like whatever the line was, it's always going to hit over, especially week 1, hour 45 in the books. And next week, we'll probably talk a little bit of movies too. So who knows? We'll let you guys know when we're done talking football next week.
Next week goes long for sure.
It's going to be, whatever the line is, whatever it opens it, absolutely hammer the over. Do appreciate y'all listening. Hit that like button. Do subscribe. Check out Rich's stuff. Check out John's stuff. Shout out to RG as well. Shout out to producer TJ. I was Dean. Thanks for listening. Go win something. Take something down. Good luck this week. We're out of here. Oh!